When Johnny Carson returned to Norfolk, Nebraska, the small Midwest town where he grew up, he expected to find memories of his humble beginnings. What he didn't expect was to find Mr. Anderson, the same radio station manager who had believed in him 35 years ago, still working at the old KFAB studio at 80 years old. The discovery stunned America's most beloved television host. While most people in Johnny's position would have offered a handshake, maybe an autograph, and continued with their day, Johnny's response to seeing his elderly mentor still working would set in motion a chain of events that no one could have anticipated. What began as a simple hometown visit would transform not just the lives of Mr. Anderson and his wife Dorothy, but Johnny himself, and ultimately an entire community. The question wasn't whether Johnny would help his former mentor, it was how far he would go to repay a debt of gratitude, nearly 4 decades in the making. No one, not even Mr. Anderson himself, could have predicted what Johnny Carson would do next. Johnny's rental car pulled up to Main Street in Norfolk, Nebraska, on a crisp autumn afternoon in 1983. The small town looked much as he remembered it. Slower, quieter, a world away from the bright lights of Studio 6B in Burbank, where he hosted The Tonight Show 5 nights a week. He sat behind the wheel for a moment, adjusting his glasses and running a hand through his graying hair. At 58 years old, Johnny Carson was the undisputed king of late-night television, 20 million viewers tuning in nightly, a household name, the man who made or broke careers with a single Tonight Show appearance. But right now, he just wanted to remember what it felt like to be that shy Nebraska kid who dreamed of being on the radio. "You sure you don't want me to come with you, Mr. Carson?" asked Tom, his assistant, from the passenger seat. Johnny shook his head. "No, this is something I need to do alone. Some memories are personal." He stepped out onto the familiar street. There, between a hardware store and a diner that had been there since his childhood, stood the old KFAB radio building. It was smaller than he remembered. The paint faded, but the call letters were still visible on the weathered sign. Johnny pushed open the door and stepped inside. The smell hit him immediately, that mix of old equipment, dust, and the peculiar scent of vacuum tubes warming up. His heart tightened with nostalgia. The reception area was cramped and outdated. A young woman at the desk looked up from her typewriter and did a double take. "Oh my goodness, Mr. Carson, Johnny Carson." Johnny gave that familiar smile, the one that had charmed America for 2 decades. "Just visiting. I used to work here a long time ago. Mind if I look around?" "Of course. The old Studio A is still here. Down the hall, first door on the right." He walked down the narrow corridor, past walls covered with photographs of local advertisers and community events. And there among them was a small framed photo of himself from 1948. A skinny 22-year-old kid with slicked back hair grinning nervously beside a microphone. When he pushed open the studio door, emotion washed over him. The room was tiny, with outdated equipment and worn carpet. But this was where it all began, where he'd done his first radio show, learned to work a microphone, discovered his talent for connecting with an audience. He was so absorbed in memory that he almost didn't notice the elderly man carefully adjusting cables near the old mixing board. The man moved slowly, but with practiced precision, treating the equipment with obvious care. "Excuse me," Johnny said softly. The old man turned, squinting through thick glasses. He wore grey slacks and a cardigan that had seen better years. "Studio's not in use right now, son. Can I help you with something?" "I hope so. I used to work here, back in the late 40s. The man stepped closer, studying Johnny's face. 1948? Lord, I was already here then. Started in 1945, after I came back from the war. Recognition suddenly dawned in his eyes. Wait a minute. Those glasses, that voice. You can't be... Johnny removed his glasses, a gesture millions of viewers would recognize. It's me, Mr. Anderson. Johnny Carson. The old man grabbed the edge of a desk for support, his weathered hands trembling. Little Johnny, the nervous kid who could barely get through a weather report without stuttering. That's the one. Johnny laughed gently, though I've gotten a bit better at it since then. Merciful heavens. Mr. Anderson shook his head in wonder. Johnny Carson, I watch you every night. Never miss The Tonight Show. Dorothy and I, we sit in front of the television at 11:30 sharp. He held out a shaking hand. Forgive me for not recognizing you right away. The eyes aren't what they used to be. Instead of just shaking hands, Johnny stepped forward and embraced the old man carefully. Mr. Anderson felt frail, like he might break. When they separated, tears were running down Mr. Anderson's lined face. I can't believe you're still here, Johnny said. Still working. How old are you now? Turned 80 last spring, Mr. Anderson said, with a trace of pride in his voice. 80 years old and you're still running the board. Well, they keep me on part-time. Can't quite afford to retire yet. But I don't mind. This old equipment, these studios, they're like family to me. Memories flooded back. How Mr. Anderson had given a shy, stuttering kid from Norfolk his first real job in radio. How he'd patiently taught him to control his nerves, to find his voice. How he'd said, after Johnny's first successful broadcast, "Son, you've got something special, a connection with people. Don't waste it. You remember giving me my first job here?" Johnny asked. Mr. Anderson's eyes lit up. Course I do. You came in with your magic tricks, wanted to do a show, couldn't get through an audition without stuttering. But there was something about you, a spark. I knew if you could just relax, you'd be something special. You were the first person who believed I could do this, Johnny said quietly. Before NBC, before everything, you gave me a chance when I was just a nervous kid. You had talent, Johnny, just needed someone to see it. And look at you now, the biggest star in television. Makes me proud every time I watch you. They stood in comfortable silence, two men separated by fame and fortune, but connected by history. Mr. Anderson, Johnny said carefully, why are you still working at 80? You should be retired enjoying life. The light dimmed in the old man's eyes. Well, retirement's for folks with a pension that covers everything. Dorothy and I, we never had much. This job pays a little. Social Security helps, but medical bills, they add up. Dorothy's got arthritis pretty bad. The treatments aren't cheap. Johnny felt a familiar tightness in his chest. I'm sorry to hear about Dorothy. I remember her bringing you lunch in those paper bags. She made the best egg salad sandwiches. She still makes them, Mr. Anderson smiled sadly. Every day. Woman's got the kindest heart, even with those painful hands. Where are you living now? Same house we bought in 1952. Out on Elm Street. Needs some work, roof leaks. Furnace is giving out, but it's home. We've raised 2 kids there, seen 5 grandchildren grow up visiting that house. Johnny made mental notes. Medical bills, house repairs, an 80-year-old man still working, because he couldn't afford not to. What time do you finish today? Johnny asked. Around 5. Got to close up the station. Mr. Anderson, would you let me take you and Dorothy to dinner tonight? I'd love to see her again, catch up properly. The old man looked surprised. You want to have dinner with us? Johnny Carson wants to have dinner with an old radio station manager. Johnny put his hand on the old man's shoulder. Mr. Anderson, you're not just an old radio station manager. You're the man who gave me my start, who believed in me when I was nobody. The least I can do is buy you dinner." Mr. Anderson's eyes filled with tears. Dorothy would be thrilled, but nothing too fancy. "Our old Ford truck isn't very reliable for long drives. I'll pick you both up at 6. Just write down your address." As Mr. Anderson wrote on a piece of paper, Johnny stepped away and made a quick phone call to his assistant Tom, his voice low and urgent. By the time he left the station, his mind was already working on a plan. That evening, Johnny's rental car pulled up to a small house on Elm Street. The house was modest, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The roof showed signs of water damage. The front yard, though neat, showed evidence of careful maintenance by someone with limited mobility. Johnny walked to the front door and knocked. Mr. Anderson opened it, wearing a pressed shirt and tie that were decades old but impeccably maintained. "Johnny, right on time. Come in, come in. Dorothy's been beside herself since I told her." Inside, the house was tiny but spotlessly clean. Every surface held family photos, children in graduation caps, grandchildren at various ages, moments of joy captured over 3 decades in this home. "Herman," a woman's voice called from the kitchen. "Is that really him?" Dorothy Anderson appeared in the doorway, moving slowly with a visible limp. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes were bright and welcoming. "Mrs. Anderson," Johnny said, taking her hand gently, "you look wonderful." "Oh, stop that," she laughed, but she was beaming. "I'm just an old woman with bad hands. But you, Johnny, we watch you every single night. You bring us so much joy." As they prepared to leave, Johnny noticed everything. The worn furniture, held together with pride and care, the drafty windows, the space heater in the corner, because the furnace wasn't reliable, medical supplies on a side table, evidence of Dorothy's arthritis treatments. He saw it all, and he filed it away. At the nicest restaurant in Norfolk, which Johnny had quietly reserved, they settled into a corner booth. Over pot roast and apple pie, Johnny asked questions and listened carefully. Their son was a teacher in Omaha, their daughter a nurse in Lincoln. Both visited when they could, but had their own families and limited means to help. Mr. Anderson had worked at KFAB for 38 years, giving countless young broadcasters their first chances. He'd kept the small station running through technological changes and economic hardships, believing in the power of local radio. Dorothy had been a school teacher for 35 years before arthritis forced her retirement. She'd taught half the town's children to read, had been beloved by generations of students. "You know what Dorothy said to me last week?" Mr. Anderson said, his voice thick with emotion. She said, "Herman, you spent your life giving people chances. Maybe it's time someone gave you a chance at peace." Johnny felt something shift inside him. That was exactly right. After dinner, as Johnny drove the Andersons home, he made a decision. The next morning, he called his business manager in California. "I need you to do something for me," Johnny said, "and I need it done quietly." "What do you have in mind, Johnny?" "Everything." Over the next 2 weeks, while Johnny was back in California taping The Tonight Show, a series of events unfolded in Norfolk, Nebraska. A construction crew arrived at the Anderson house, explaining that they'd been hired by an anonymous benefactor to make urgent repairs. The roof was replaced. The furnace was upgraded. Windows were sealed. The porch was rebuilt. Accessibility features were installed for Dorothy: grab bars, a walk-in shower, lower cabinets she could reach, despite her arthritis. A local Ford dealership delivered a new truck to the Andersons with a note, "For all the miles ahead." An attorney arrived with documents establishing a trust fund that would cover all medical expenses and provide monthly income, and KFAB received an anonymous donation to upgrade their equipment and establish a fund for maintaining operations. Mr. Anderson called the number he had for Johnny at NBC, reaching Tom instead. "I don't know what's happening, Mr. Anderson said, his voice shaking, "but I think Johnny had something to do with all this. Can you tell him? Tell him we don't know how to thank him." "He knows," Tom said gently. "And he wants you to know one more thing. He's established the Anderson Broadcasting Scholarship at the University of Nebraska for students from small towns who want to go into radio or television. You'll be on the board, if you accept." When Johnny returned to Norfolk 3 weeks later, he found the Andersons at their transformed home. Mr. Anderson had tears in his eyes. "Why did you do all this?" he asked. Johnny smiled, that familiar smile, but this time with deep emotion. "You remember what you told me in 1948? I wanted to quit, go back to college, give up on broadcasting. I didn't think I was good enough. But you said, 'Johnny, you've got a gift for making people comfortable, for making them feel like you're talking just to them. Don't waste that gift.' Those words kept me going through years of small stations, bad gigs, uncertainty. You didn't just give me a job, Mr. Anderson. You gave me confidence. You gave me my career. I just saw potential," Mr. Anderson said. "You saw more than potential. You saw me when I couldn't see myself." And everything that came after. The Tonight Show, everything started right here in Norfolk, because you believed in a stuttering kid with a dream. Mr. Anderson looked around at his repaired home, at Dorothy moving easily with her new accessibility features, at the future opening before them. "I don't know what to say. You already said everything 35 years ago. This is just me saying thank you." 6 months later, the Anderson Broadcasting Scholarship had helped 8 students from small Nebraska towns pursue broadcasting careers. Mr. Anderson had retired from KFAB and spent his days on the scholarship board, mentoring young broadcasters just as he'd once mentored Johnny. Dorothy's arthritis treatments were fully covered, and she'd regained some mobility. She volunteered at the local library, reading to children just as she'd done as a teacher. Their children and grandchildren visited often, staying comfortably in the renovated guest room, and every night at 11:30, Herman and Dorothy Anderson sat in their living room and watched The Tonight Show, knowing they'd played a small but crucial role in creating the man millions of Americans welcomed into their homes. One evening, during a commercial break, Dorothy turned to her husband. "Did you ever imagine, back in 1948, that nervous boy would become this?" Herman thought for a moment. "I knew he had something special, but this, no, this exceeded anything I could have imagined. You gave him his chance, and he gave us ours," Herman said, squeezing her hand. The show came back on. Johnny was doing his monologue, that perfect timing, that connection with the audience that had made him a legend. And Herman Anderson smiled, knowing that in a small way, in a tiny radio studio in Norfolk, Nebraska, 35 years ago, he'd helped create a piece of American television history. Sometimes the smallest acts of belief create the biggest ripples, and sometimes, if you're very fortunate, those ripples come back to you in ways you never expected. All because one person saw potential when others saw only nervousness. All because one person said yes when others might have said no. All because one person believed, and that belief changed everything.